Dick Tiger's life flipped from triumph to tragedy. A boxing legend with over 60 professional wins, he served as a soldier in the Biafran War, giving away his prize money to save starving children. But behind the knockout victories and fame, his private life tells a different tale. Betrayal, exile, and abandonment, in and out of the ring. Banned from his own country, stripped of his wealth, and left to die alone at just 42 years old. How did an undisputed champion become boxing's most forgotten outcast? To answer that, we have to go back to where it all began. Richard Ihetu was born on August 14, 1929, in the dusty heart of colonial Nigeria, Amaigbo, a small village rooted in tradition, resilience, and quiet strength. He was Igbo, raised by a people who had learned to carry the weight of oppression with silent dignity. As a boy, he worked the land, fetched water, and wore the tribal marks of his ancestors, scars carved into his face that didn't just symbolize heritage. They screamed defiance. Even then, you could tell this kid wasn't going to stay buried in the dirt forever. Because Richard didn't just want more, he needed more. More than what the farm could give him. More than what his village could imagine. And eventually, he found it in the one place that doesn't care where you come from, only how hard you hit. The boxing ring. But not in Nigeria. His first pro bout wasn't in the heat of Africa. It was in the cold, gray fight halls of post-war England. Just imagine that. A young African man, barely known, walking into hostile crowds and smoky arenas where the odds weren't just against him. They were laughing in his face. The fans didn't know his name, promoters didn't care. And the money? It barely covered the bus fare. He was an outsider in every sense of the word. And the worst part? He wasn't winning. Early on, Dick Tiger, yes, Tiger, the name he chose to wear like armor, wasn't some phenom smashing opponents left and right. He lost. A lot. He fought on undercards for scraps, took beatings that would have sent other men packing, and still showed up again the next week with gloves on and chin up. If you were watching from the outside, you might have thought that was it. Any sane fighter would have walked away. No manager, no hype, no protection, just failure and a cruel, uncaring system. But Tiger kept showing up, kept fighting, and kept believing there was something more for him. Because deep down, he knew something the world hadn't figured out yet. He wasn't just there to fight. He was there to matter. The turning point came when he met Hogan Kid Bassi. Bassi was no ordinary fighter. He was a Nigerian featherweight champion who had already made a name for himself. And in Dick Tiger, he saw it. Not polished skill, not flash, but something better. Stubbornness, unbreakable drive, and toughness that went beyond technique. Bassi didn't just offer encouragement. He handed Tiger the keys to a new future. He introduced him to Jersey Jones and Jimmy August, two seasoned handlers who knew how to turn raw talent into a weapon. And that one connection flipped the script. Under their guidance, everything changed. They tightened his stance, sharpened his fundamentals, and stripped away the rough edges. Training was brutal, but Tiger thrived in it. He wasn't chasing respect anymore. He was chasing domination. Every round in the gym, every sparring session, every painful morning run became a step toward something bigger. And it started to show. The losses stopped. The wins piled up. Promoters stopped ignoring him. And opponents started ducking him. The quiet kid was becoming a serious problem. By 1958, Tiger had fought his way into a shot at the British Commonwealth middleweight title. This wasn't just a fight. It was a reckoning. And when the bell rang, he didn't squeak by. He steamrolled. He took that belt like he was owed it, raising it high for Amaigbo, for his family, for every kid told to know your place. The win marked a turning point. Tiger was now a champion, not just a survivor. But respect is cheap in boxing if you're not the name on the marquee. The sport was shifting, and Tiger was about to learn that politics, promoters, and backroom deals could hit harder than a right cross. The next battles wouldn't be settled by power alone, but by how well he could navigate a rigged game. So if you think that belt fixed his problems, you're in for a rude awakening. The real fight was just beginning, and it was about to get nastier than anything inside the ropes. The climb to the top of the boxing world was never about hype. While the sport was filled with loudmouths and showmen, Tiger just walked forward and broke people down. Quiet, surgical, relentless. And at his peak, he was a two-time undisputed world middleweight champion and a world light heavyweight champ, an achievement that put him among the sport's elite. But the higher he climbed, the more he met the one enemy he couldn't knock out: the backroom politics and greasy palms that ran boxing from the shadows. His middleweight reign in the early 60s was pure violence wrapped in discipline. In 1962, he ripped the WBA title off Gene Fullmer, a granite-chinned warhorse, and then did it again. The rematch ended with Fullmer's own corner waving the white flag after 7 brutal rounds. Tiger's relentless body shots and stamina set him apart, and for the first time, fans outside Nigeria started to pay real attention. This wasn't just another belt collector. This guy was keeping a dying sport alive. Boxing was in a slump in the late 50s and early 60s, crowds thinning, interest fading. Tiger's rise gave it a pulse. The Ring even named him Fighter of the Year in 1962, and again in 1965. But don't think the story ends with trophies and applause. The real fight, the rigged cards, the hometown decisions, the mob fingerprints, was just warming up. And Tiger was about to find out how ugly winning could get. Outside the ropes, he was forced into a dirtier fight: boxing politics. Nowhere was that more brutal than his 4-fight rivalry with Joey Giardello. Their December 1963 title bout in Atlantic City was the flashpoint, a close, grueling war that plenty of ringside eyes swore Tiger won. But the judges gave it to Giardello right in his own backyard. Tiger had no choice but to fight there. He needed the payday, and the promoters called the shots. When the decision was announced, it felt less like a loss and more like a robbery. Mob fingerprints, backroom whispers, and a system that punished anyone who wouldn't play along. Tiger saw all of it up close. He asked for a fair rematch on neutral ground. He never got it. In boxing, skill gets you through the ropes. Power brokers decide what happens after the bell. And still, he refused to fold. At 36, when most fighters are measuring their last payday, he jumped to light heavyweight and challenged Jose Torres, a younger, stronger favorite. Tiger took command from round 1, outthinking and outfighting him to steal the title in 1966. It was one of his greatest ambushes, proof he wasn't just a brawler, he was a tactician who could beat anyone, anywhere. But that crowning moment set up a choice that would cost him more than any crooked scorecard ever could. Even after grabbing world titles in 2 divisions, Tiger never got the star treatment. Insiders respected him, hardcore fans loved him. But in America, he was still that African champ, an outsider. Promoters struggled to market him. He didn't run his mouth, didn't dance for cameras, didn't play the clown. And in the 1960s, being a black African champion meant the spotlight always seemed to slide somewhere else. The business side didn't help either. Managers skimmed, promoters squeezed, and like countless fighters before him, Tiger watched real money evaporate into other people's pockets. The game wasn't built to protect fighters. It was built to keep the money flowing to those who ran things behind the scenes. Even his most impressive victories often came with strings attached, and he was forced to accept fights on terms that rarely favored him. Eventually, the sport had to admit what fans already knew. His legacy couldn't be ignored forever. In 1991, he finally got his Hall of Fame induction, a nice plaque, years too late. By then, the damage outside the ropes had already done its work. And just when he hit the peak of his career, something bigger than belts started pulling him away. The next fight wasn't about paydays or headlines. It was about blood, loyalty, and a cause that cut straight to his core. When the Nigerian Civil War exploded in 1967, he jumped straight into the fire. This wasn't abstract politics. It was his people, the Igbo, fighting for survival as the Southeast declared itself the Republic of Biafra. Tiger didn't hesitate. In June, at a New Jersey press conference, he drew his line, "Nigeria died, I'm now Biafran." It was a public declaration, and in one sentence, he'd just dared an entire nation to come at him. and he backed it up. That same month, he mailed his MBE, Member of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, an honor he'd accepted in 1963, back to the British consulate. Why? Because Britain was supplying arms to the Nigerian government, and those weapons were being used against his own people. Tiger's note was blunt. He couldn't keep a medal while millions of my people are dying. That wasn't symbolism. That was a punch thrown at the empire, and it cost him more than any defeat in the ring ever could. The consequences came fast. Supporting Biafra meant risking everything he'd built. The Nigerian government quickly declared him persona non grata, stripping him of his right to return. His 7 apartment houses and other investments? Seized. Years of brutal paydays, roughly $500,000, gone in a heartbeat. All the wealth he'd built through years of punishing fights vanished almost overnight. One decision, and he became a man without a country, his legacy in Nigeria erased by a government that now saw him as a traitor. He'd taken on boxing's mob politics and survived. But this was bigger. This was a champion choosing conscience over comfort and paying in blood and bricks. But Tiger didn't flinch. Instead, he doubled down and drained everything he had left into the Biafran cause. He didn't just send money, he put himself right in the middle of the action. He flew to Lisbon, bought food and baby supplies with his own prize money, and loaded the planes personally because he didn't trust middlemen. Then he went even further. In December 1967, he was commissioned a second lieutenant in the Biafran army. Forget the silk trunks. He wore fatigues, drilling terrified teenagers in hand-to-hand combat. Footage from March 1968 shows him in a dusty clearing teaching men barely older than boys how to fight for their lives. He hauled injured children to hospitals after bombing raids. He begged the world to look, press conferences, interviews, any microphone he could grab, desperate to make everyone see what was happening in his homeland. Dick Tiger didn't just lend his name, he burned his body and soul for the cause. But the war dragged on, and Biafra never caught a break. By January 1970, after nearly 3 brutal years, the Republic surrendered. The dream of independence was crushed, and for Tiger it wasn't just a political defeat, it was personal devastation. Nigeria didn't just ban him, it erased him. No homecoming, no properties, no applause. Everything he'd bled for, all of it lost, because he chose his people over his own comfort. Think about that whiplash. One moment you're a national hero, the next you're a ghost, cut off from your land, your money, your past. That was the bill for Tiger's loyalty. Exile and financial ruin. He kept his principles. The world shrugged and moved on. And the scar from that kind of loss? It never heals. When the guns finally went quiet, he walked into a new fight, one that had nothing to do with boxing gloves or battlefields. The fall was brutal. Yesterday's world champion was now a night security guard at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, making $96 a week to pace empty halls. No roar of Madison Square Garden, just the echo of his own footsteps after hours. Nobody cared that he'd been the pride of Nigeria or a 2-division king. He was just another immigrant on the graveyard shift. No endorsements, no TV gigs, no safety net. Boxing chewed him up, Nigeria spit him out, and the rest of the world brushed it off. And just when you think that's rock bottom, wait until you see the next punch life throws at him. The grind of daily survival took its toll, and so did the weight of everything he'd carried. Years of wars, inside rings and inside his own country, left his body wrecked. Chronic pain, constant treatment, out of reach. There was no time, no money, no safety net. Then 1970 hit with the one punch he couldn't slip: liver cancer. This was the opponent you don't outlast. He faced it alone, no family close, no nation behind him. Just a cold diagnosis in a foreign city that barely knew his name. The disease moved fast. His world shrank to a cramped apartment and the dead-end rhythm of night shifts, counting every dollar like it was his last. The boxing world, the same one that had fed off his blood and willpower, went quiet. There were no fundraisers, no tributes, no lifeline from the sport he'd helped keep alive. Isolation settled in heavy. The man who had once been a symbol of pride now struggled to pay the light bill as his body thinned out week after week. And just when you think that's the end of the story, there's one last twist coming. Nigeria only cracked the door open when it became obvious Dick Tiger was dying. Let's be real, it wasn't mercy. It was damage control. Word of his terminal cancer reached home, and suddenly the persona non grata stamp faded. Not because they forgave him, but because letting a national icon die in exile would have been an international embarrassment. The timing was clear. Only when his death seemed inevitable did they open the door for him to return. But by then, there was nothing left to salvage. His health was failing fast, his money was gone, and whatever future he might have rebuilt had already been burned to ash. He returned quietly. No crowds at the airport, no honors, no parade. Just a sick man slipping back into a country that once disowned him. Back in Nigeria, the silence was louder than any ovation he'd ever earned. The gesture from the government was empty, and the public had moved on. The friends and family who remembered his glory days saw a different man now, tired, sick, and far removed from the champion they once knew. The boxing community at home and abroad offered little more than distant respect. Exile, poverty, cancer, they'd stripped him of everything but the stubborn dignity that got him this far. The recognition he deserved never fully came. Not when it mattered. It's hard not to wonder, how does a champion who fought nations and mobsters end up fighting his own body with no one left in his corner? And why do we only celebrate our heroes once they're already gone? Dick Tiger's tragic legacy is one of the most striking examples of how a hero can be celebrated in life and abandoned in death. After passing away at just 42 in Aba, Nigeria, his story didn't end with the outpouring of national gratitude you might expect for someone who once put his country and his life on the line. Instead, the years that followed were marked by silence. No monuments, just a grave that, for years, sat lonely and ignored, untouched by the crowds or tributes you'd think a national icon deserved. There were no grand memorials, no steady stream of admirers. One of Africa's greatest fighters, a man who bled for his people, left to rest in a plot no one bothered to visit. That's not just neglect, it's an indictment. If you ever wondered what true erasure looks like, look at his headstone. Tiger's family felt the slap of that silence. His son, Barrister Richard Ihetu Jr., didn't sugarcoat it. My father has not been adequately honored by his fatherland. This wasn't about shiny medals or some token statue. It was about justice. Dick Tiger wasn't just an athlete. He was one of the first Africans to crash through boxing's front door and drag Nigeria's name onto the world stage. He wore those colors proudly when barely anyone else cared. But when it mattered most, his country looked away. And yet his real legacy lives on in ways that official honors never could. In Amegbo, there's the Dick Tiger Memorial Secondary School, built with his own money before he even built his own house. Let that sink in. He funded classrooms before he funded a roof over his head, using his own wallet to offer opportunities to kids who might never have had them otherwise. The school stands as a testament to the kind of man he was, a man who put his people first, quietly, without fanfare. That's the kind of memorial you can't erase, a private act of devotion that endures even when the rest of the world looks away. If you think Dick Tiger's legacy has been overlooked, prove it. Hit the like button so boxing history knows you're still watching. His story deserves more than a footnote. It's a warning. The people who give the most often get the least. And this isn't just about sports. It's about how we treat anyone who stands on principle when it costs them everything. Tiger forces us to stare at the ugly truth. Heroes don't always get statues, especially if their choices challenge the official story. There's no way to talk about Dick Tiger without talking about the price he paid for standing by his convictions. Backing Biafra made him a problem for Nigeria's narrative, and that problem has shadowed his legacy ever since. So do we let that silence finish the job? Or do we say his name louder? When you look at Dick Tiger's journey, you see more than just a two-division world champion. You see a man who put everything on the line, his career, his wealth, and his future, for his people and his beliefs. He renounced his British honors, served on the front lines, and lost almost everything for a cause he refused to abandon. That's a story that shouldn't be forgotten. His life challenges us to do better, to remember, to honor, and to learn. And as we look back on everything he accomplished, it's clear that his story still matters, even if the world sometimes forgets. That's the real measure of a hero. Not just what they achieve, but how they inspire us to think, to question, and to remember. What do you think? Should a nation honor a hero who challenged it? Or let him fade because he refused to fall in line? Drop your take in the comments below. If you're with Tiger, make sure everyone knows it. And if you think his legacy deserves more recognition, share this video so others can learn about him too. See you in the next one.